If you believe that family can never decide your life without asking you, then this story will prove you wrong. My name is Alison Wright, and for 5 years, my parents believed that I had ruined my life. They never once asked me about it. I was the eldest daughter in my family, and in our house, being the eldest meant being sensible, quiet, and adjusting far more than necessary. My younger sister Emma was a voice in every room. I was just a presence in every room. She spoke. People believed her. I stayed quiet. People decided for me. In childhood, I learned early that if you don't ask too many questions, people find you easy. So I stopped asking questions. In my final year of college, I received a research fellowship, far from the East Coast, a small program that most people had never even heard of. My father only said, "That's fine, but it's not a big deal." That was the last time he ever called one of my dreams by its name. 3 months later, my life came to a halt. My closest friend was hospitalized due to an illness. Suddenly, rapidly. I didn't run away from college. I just took a formal break. Everything was on paper. Everything was approved. I called home. Emma said, "I'll explain everything to Mom and Dad. You stay there for now." I trusted her. 2 weeks later, my father called. His voice sounded unfamiliar. "Have you dropped out of college?" I said, "No." He said, "Don't lie. Emma has told us everything." In that one moment, I understood that there was no place left for the truth. I tried to explain. I sent emails, attached documents, names, numbers, everything. No one opened them. Then my calls were blocked. The strangest part wasn't that they didn't trust me. The strangest part was that they never even tried to verify anything. For 6 days, I kept calling. On the 7th day, I learned how to stop. This wasn't defeat. It was an understanding. 5 years later, I was standing in a place my family had never even imagined I could reach, but they still believed that I was lost somewhere. And the day the truth was about to come out, that day, I wasn't prepared to prove anything, because the truth never asks for preparation. And this is where the story truly begins. That night, after the call was cut off, I didn't lie on my bed for a long time. I sat on the floor, my back against the wall, phone in my hand, as if I was still waiting for a call. But no call came. The next day, I sent the first email. Short, direct. There was no explanation in it. No emotional sentences. Just facts. Approval of the formal break. University letterhead. Coordinator's name. Direct phone number. I thought, now this will end. 3 days passed. The email wasn't even opened. On the 4th day, I sent a second email. This one slightly longer. I wrote where I was, why I had paused, and when I would return. I wrote that I was still the same person. That one also received no reply. On the 5th day, I called my mother. The phone rang once, then straight to voicemail. I didn't say anything. Only the sound of my breathing got recorded. On the 6th day, my father's number was blocked too. The strangest part wasn't that they were angry with me. The strangest part was that they were completely certain, without ever speaking to me, as if my absence itself had become proof. Later, I found out that during those 6 days, without me, an entire story had been created. In that story, I wasn't responsible. I was careless. I wasn't sick. I had been misled. I hadn't taken a break. I had run away. And that story was narrated by the most trustworthy voice. My younger sister. She told everyone the same single line. I'm trying to explain things to her, but she just doesn't want to hear the truth. That line was so gentle, that no one could doubt it. I made one last attempt. I asked my professor to call my home. He personally tried to speak to my father. That same evening, I received a message. One line: "We don't need outsiders to explain family matters to us." After that, I did nothing. No calls, no emails, no messages. I understood that now, this wasn't a battle for truth, but a battle for control. And truth, in front of control, always loses. In the following months, I did what I knew how to do. I worked. I kept myself so busy that there was no time left to think. Lab during the day, library at night. Sometimes, I would see an empty chair and feel as if someone had removed me from that place. 6 months later, I returned. Everything was the same. The desk, the files, the registration. My life hadn't stopped. But in my home, the space meant for me had been filled long ago. I found out that my graduation date was never even added to the family calendar, because for them, it was never going to happen. That day, for the first time, I understood one thing clearly. Some people are not afraid of the truth. They are afraid that if the truth comes out, they will have to feel ashamed of their decisions. And that was the reason that for 5 years, everything was said about me, except asking me. And this was only the beginning, because to protect the truth they had chosen, they would have to do much more going forward. And this was only the beginning, because to protect the truth they had chosen, they would have to do much more going forward. I had stopped calling, but I had not stopped waiting. Every morning, I picked up my phone, looked at the screen, then placed it face down. No missed calls, no messages. And in this silence, one strange thing started becoming clear. They weren't angry. They weren't worried either. They were just at ease, as if they no longer needed to know anything about my life. In the first month, I convinced myself that maybe they just needed time. In the second month, I accepted that time had now become an excuse. In the third month, I realized that without me, everything was running just fine. During the holidays, no one called. On my birthday, not a single card arrived. And the strangest thing, no one even asked whether I was okay or not. Later, I understood that the answer to that had already been given by my sister. Every time, the same line. She's still trying to find herself. So clear, so polite, so believable. Even then, I never said her name. In anger. Because anger only comes when you believe the other person is listening. I threw myself into work. Research during the day. Notes in the evening. Library at night. Sleep kept decreasing. The mind stayed sharp. And the heart, somewhere in between, went silent. One evening, I received an email. The sender was not from my family. The subject line read, "Just wanted to ask." The email was short. "We've heard that you haven't been doing well. If you ever feel like talking, I'm here." I looked at the screen, and for the first time, I felt that my silence was no longer mine. It had become proof for someone else's story. I didn't reply, not because I didn't want to talk, but because I understood. If I said anything, it would turn into an explanation, and I was no longer in a place where I needed to explain myself. That night, I stayed awake for a long time, thinking about how easily someone's absence can be used against them. And in that very moment, one thing became very clear. The truth doesn't die when people stop believing it. The truth gets buried when no one even asks the person who carries it. And I knew that very soon, this silence was going to become Uncomfortable for them too. Because, to keep a lie alive, every time, a new story is needed. And in the next story, my name, for the first time, was going to become a question. And in the next story, my name, for the first time, was going to become a question. That question did not arrive like an argument. It was neither angry nor accusing. It came like a simple curiosity. I was in the library, afternoon time, the room almost empty. In the corner of my laptop, a new email notification flashed. The sender's name was unfamiliar. The subject line read, Alison Wright, a small confirmation. I looked at the screen, and for the first time, I was not in a hurry, because something inside me already understood that this was the moment for which the lie had been kept alive for so many years. The email was formal, very polite. It said that some information linked to my name was being cross-verified. My education, the duration of my break, my current status. No one had pointed a finger at me, but for the first time, someone had refused to accept my absence at face value. I didn't reply immediately. I closed the laptop, picked up my bag, and walked out. The air was cold. New England's cold wind, the kind that hits your face and clears your thoughts. I knew that if I replied right then, it would turn into an explanation, and I was no longer in that part of the explanation where I had to defend myself. That night, for the first time, I opened the old folders, emails, letterheads, dates, names, everything, exactly as it was. The truth had never gone anywhere. The next morning, I sent my reply. Very short. I didn't explain anything. I didn't prove anything. I simply sent everything that already existed. That same day, afternoon, my mother called. After 5 years, the phone rang. For a very long time, I didn't pick up. Then again, then a message. We need to talk to you. Right now. I read the message and placed the phone on the table, because for the first time, the need for the conversation was not mine, it was theirs. By evening, my father's email arrived. The first line was, "There are some things we don't understand." That was the sentence lies are afraid of, not understanding. He wrote that some questions had come up. Some information didn't match. Some things weren't the way they had been told to him. He didn't apologize to me. He didn't ask me for the truth. He simply wrote, "We need to talk." I closed the laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I didn't feel angry. For the first time, I didn't even feel sad. I just felt this. Now the story could not move forward without me. And this was the place where 5 years of silence, for the first time, started to hurt them. Because, when a lie gets old, every new question shakes it. And the next question was no longer going to be asked to me, but to my sister. And the next question was no longer going to be asked to me, but to my sister. I knew this, not because I had any inside information, but because lies always run in the same direction, back toward their source. That night, I didn't call anyone. I didn't message anyone. I just waited. Because for the first time, waiting was not my helplessness. The next morning, my father's second email arrived. Shorter than the first. Less formal. He wrote that he had spoken to Emma. That was all. Just that one sentence. And a lot was hidden inside it. I didn't reply. I knew this was not the moment where my voice was needed. If I said anything, it would turn into an argument. And lies grow stronger in arguments. By afternoon, I received a message from Emma. For the first time in 5 years, there was no accusation in the message. No question. Just one line. We need to talk. I placed the phone on the table and looked out the window. People were walking on the street. No one knew that somewhere, a story was searching for its last support. I didn't reply, not because I was afraid, but because I had already understood. If she were going to speak the truth, this line would have been different. In the evening, my mother called again. This time, I answered. Alison. Her voice was trembling. I said nothing. Sometimes, silence is more honest than a question. We don't understand some things. She repeated. I said softly, I know. She paused. Emma is saying that maybe there was some misunderstanding. That was the word. Misunderstanding. So small, so convenient, so insulting. I didn't interrupt her. I just asked, why didn't you ever ask me? There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. Then she said, we thought. We didn't want to disturb you. I smiled, maybe for the first time, because that is the same line everyone uses when they don't want to ask. And now? I asked. Now? Her voice broke. Now we don't know what is right. This was the moment where the truth comes and stops near the door. It only enters when someone invites it in. I said, I had already sent you everything. She said nothing. That night, Emma's second message arrived. This time, long, written very carefully. In it, she said that she never wanted to hurt anyone, that she was just trying to manage the situation. I read the message and locked the phone, because now the story was no longer about emotions. It had become a story of accountability, and I knew the next conversation would either bring the truth or change everything forever. Because when a question reaches its source, a lie is left with only two paths. Because when a question reaches its source, a lie is left with only two paths. The first path, the complete truth. The second, a little bit of truth and a lot of fear. The next morning, my father called. Not an email, not a message, a direct call. I picked up the phone and said nothing. Neither did he. Sometimes, silence on both sides is the most honest conversation. We met Emma. He finally said. There was that familiar strictness in his voice. In its place, there was something else. Exhaustion, she said. She was trying to protect us. He continued. I didn't ask. From what? Because I already knew the answer. She said. You needed time. He said that you weren't able to handle everything on your own. I closed my eyes. It was the same story, just with a little Polish. And you? I asked. There were a few seconds of silence on the other end. Then he said. We asked why she didn't show us your emails. That one line filled the entire room. What did she say? I asked softly. She said she didn't want to disturb us further. He replied. I didn't laugh. I didn't feel angry either. I just felt a strange kind of tiredness, because lies always dress themselves in the clothes of compassion. Dad. For the first time, I called him by that name. If I had lied to you 5 years ago, wouldn't you have questioned me? He didn't reply immediately. When he spoke, his voice was slow. Maybe we would have. He said. That was it. The entire answer. That day, my mother sent a message. Long. She wrote that she didn't understand how she could have missed something so big for so many years. She wrote that she was wondering whether she had trusted an easy story too quickly. I didn't reply. Not yet. In the evening, Emma called. For the first time, the phone kept ringing. I didn't answer, because some conversations only happen when both sides have the courage to hold the truth. At night, I received a voicemail. Her voice was shaking. I never wanted things to go this far. She said, "I just got scared." Fear. That same word. I didn't listen to the entire voicemail. I stopped it midway, because fear is an emotion. But what she did was a choice. That night, I sat for a long time, thinking about how easily a family stops distinguishing between truth and convenience. And in that moment, I knew now the next step was in my hands. Either I would try to explain everything once again, or, for the first time, explain nothing at all. Because the truth is most powerful when it does not need to be defended. And I had decided, next time, I was not going to prove anything. And I had decided, next time, I was not going to prove anything. The next morning, I arrived at work on time. Not early, not late. I wore the same clothes I usually wear, the same badge, the same calm walk. Because when you're not going to prove anything, you don't need to change anything. Around noon, my mother messaged again. This time, there was no question. It just said, "Can we meet?" I looked at the screen and put the phone in my pocket. I knew that this question was not really hers. It belonged to her restlessness. In between work, there was a meeting. Long, slightly exhausting. I took notes, asked questions, gave answers, and for the first time, I realized that the two parts of my life were no longer even touching each other. One part, where everything was clear, and another, where every word was being chosen carefully. In the evening, my father called. I answered. "We want you to talk to Emma," he said. Direct, without any preface. I asked, "Why?" He paused, then said, "Because she is breaking down." I looked out the window. It had started raining on the street. And when I was breaking down, I asked softly. Then there was no answer. On the other end of the phone, "I'm not punishing anyone," I said. "I'm just deciding my place for myself now." He tried to say something, then stopped. "We don't want to lose you," he finally said. I didn't reply, because losing someone happens when someone tries to hold on. And for 5 years, no one had even reached out a hand. That night, Emma messaged again. This time, even longer. She wrote that she couldn't sleep at night, that she was scared everything would change forever. I read it and locked the phone, because fear was not my responsibility. The next day, I received an email. The sender related to my work. A new project, a bigger responsibility, an opportunity I had worked toward for years. I wrote yes, without thinking, and in that moment, it became clear to me, my life was no longer going to be the result of any conversation. In the evening, my mother's final message arrived. "If we don't meet now, it might be too late." For the first time, I replied to that message. Just one line. "I'm not running away. I'm just choosing myself." And in that very moment, I knew the meeting that would happen now would not be on demand. It would be on terms. Because when someone doesn't try to prove anything, that's when they decide when and how the next door will open. Because when someone doesn't try to prove anything, that's when they decide when and how the next door will open. I chose the date to meet myself, the place too. No home, no old memories, a quiet cafe, right in the middle of the city, where people keep coming and going, and no story gets trapped inside any wall. I arrived 5 minutes early. No nervousness, no anticipation, just one clear feeling. This meeting was not going to decide the direction of my life. They both arrived on time. My mother first, my father behind her. On both their faces was the same caution people wear when they're afraid. One wrong word could ruin everything. We sat down. Coffee was ordered. For a few seconds, no one spoke. My mother began. "We've thought a lot," she said. I nodded. My father said, "We realized that we never really asked you the right questions." I didn't reply, because this wasn't an apology. This was a soft knock on a door. "Emma." My mother said her name and stopped. I raised my hand. "Right there. Today, we will not talk about her," I said. My voice was calm, but final. They both looked at me, slightly startled. "If this conversation is meant to protect someone," I continued, "then that is a conversation I will not have." My father took a deep breath. "Then what is it for?" he asked. For the first time, I looked straight at him. "For this," I said. "To decide what happens next." The coffee arrived. Cups were placed. The pause between words grew deeper. "We want you to come back." My mother began to say, "No." I stopped her. "I'm not coming back." What broke on their faces was not hope. It was habit. "I never went anywhere," I said. "You just assumed that I had left." My father lowered his eyes. "If there is going to be any relationship going forward," I said softly, "it will be on certain terms." I didn't start listing them. I didn't explain. I just said, "I will not give explanations. I will not justify my life. And in any conversation, interrupting me will no longer be an option." My mother's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't say anything. My father asked only this, "And if we are wrong again?" I replied, "Then it will be the last time." In that one sentence, there was no threat, no anger, just clarity. We stood up. No hugs, no promises, just an understanding. As I walked out of the cafe, I didn't look back, because, for the first time today, I was certain what was left behind was not calling me back, and the real confrontation was still ahead, because the next conversation would not be with my parents, but directly with the one who had started this story. Because the next conversation was not going to be with my parents, but directly with the one who had started this story. I didn't ask to meet her. I waited. Because people who build stories don't stay quiet once the story starts slipping out of their hands. 2 days later, her message arrived. No preface, no emotional setup, just one line. "Can we meet?" I didn't reply immediately. I knew this question wasn't for me. It was for her fear. I kept the place the same as before, the same cafe, the same time, because people who run from the truth feel most uncomfortable in neutral spaces. She arrived late. That was her habit. Never truly late, just enough to make sure the attention in the room was already hers. As soon as she sat down, she said, "I don't know how you went so far away." I looked at the coffee, then toward the window. "I didn't go anywhere," I said. "You all left me right there." She laughed, just a little, like someone trying to turn something wrong into a joke. "You always take things too seriously," she said. That was it. That same sentence that had managed everything for 5 years. "Mom and Dad are very upset," she said. "They feel like all of this is their fault." For the first time, I looked straight into her eyes. "And what do you think?" I asked. She paused, just briefly, then said, "I think everyone was just trying to fix things in their own way." I nodded. "No," I said. "You weren't trying to fix anything." She leaned back. "You managed the story," I said. "You decided who would hear what, who would believe what." Her face hardened for the first time. "You can't prove that," she said. I smiled. "I don't need to prove anything," I said. "You're the one who needs to defend now." She lowered her voice. "I was just scared," she said. "You were moving ahead." Fear. That same word. Fear is an emotion, I said. "But what you did was a plan." She tried to say something, then stopped. Because some answers only work when the other person still wants to listen. "So what do you want now?" she asked. For the first time, directly, I said without pausing, "I want you to say the same story, out loud, to everyone, that you told, behind my back." Her breath stopped. "In front of everyone," she repeated. "In front of every person." I said, "Who believed me, without ever seeing me?" She stayed silent for a long time. Then she said softly, "And if I don't?" Leaning back in my chair, I said, "Then this conversation will be the last one between us." In that moment, there was no sound in the room, just two truths sitting across from each other. And I knew, now she also had the same two paths. Every lie has. Either she would say everything, or she would lose everything. Either she would say everything, or she would lose everything. She didn't speak for a long time. The coffee had gone cold. The noise of the cafe stood between us, like a wall. Then she said, "You know what people will do?" I nodded. "Yes," I said. "They'll be shocked. Some will be angry. Some will go quiet." "And Mom and Dad?" she asked. For the first time, there was concern in that question. "They'll do what they should have done 5 years ago," I said. "Think." She didn't laugh. Not this time. She just lowered her eyes. "I need time," she said. I replied, "Truth doesn't need time. It needs courage." We stood up. No handshake. No promises. Just an understanding hanging in the air. 3 days later, Mom called. Her voice was different than before. She wrote. She said, "I didn't ask anything. To everyone." Mom said, "The whole family." Nothing moved inside me. That night, I opened the email. 3 paragraphs. No more, no less. She wrote that she had hidden information, that she had twisted things, that she had assumed she could decide who should know what. She also wrote, "Alison never went anywhere. We left her right here." Some replies came. Some didn't. Some people apologized. Some just sent a heart emoji. And some Stayed silent. Mom called again. Can we meet? She asked. I said, not yet. She said nothing. And for the first time, I liked that. Dad sent a message. One line. We need to learn how to ask questions. I replied, when you're ready. That evening, I sat alone, in my apartment, outside the window. The city kept moving. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel revenge either. I just felt one thing clearly. Now my story would not move without me. I didn't invite my parents myself. I left the door open because that was the difference. A few weeks later, they came. They were awkward, hesitant, but they came. We didn't fix everything. We didn't forgive everything. We just decided that from now on, no story would be made without asking, and that was enough for me. People ask, is everything okay now? I say, no, but are you okay? I say, yes, because being okay doesn't ask for someone else's approval. This story is not about forgiveness. This story is about control. And if you've made it this far, maybe you know too. Sometimes the strongest answer is not proving anything at all, because the truth only lasts when it isn't propped up by someone else's belief.